Hello, welcome to What a Relief. I'm Dave Reilly. We're going to take a little departure from my normal work on this issue. The editor, Chris DeHut, has asked me to make a table comparing it to his prototype that you see here. The only difference would be then I would incorporate my skills of the wood carving and see how we could compare the two types. Now this is what I have come up with. As you can see, the dimensions are essentially the same as his. The height, the width, all the features are the same, but I have incorporated the carving. I have here a carved molding around the front. I have here this medallion is carved, and then I have the front face has a relief carving. After examining his prototype, I was struck by the fact that to me it had an Oriental or a Chinese influence. So that's what I have done here on this table with the cutouts here, the Chinese character carved into the medallion. So other than that, all the features are essentially the same, and I hope you're going to enjoy it. So what we can do now is take a look at some of the more closer at the details. All right, now we can take a look at some of the details here of the table. One feature is the carved molding all around the top. The frame is straight panels. There is this carved section here in the front. These brackets are a very simple addition. The legs have a curve to them. They start narrow and flare out. These stringers have a curve at the bottom. This rear panel is attached to the center bar here. The thing to notice, though, is, so you're not confused on the drawings, is that the bars are wider at the top than they are at the bottom. So when you see a different dimension on your drawings, it was not a mistake. It is intended to be that way. Other than that, all the other features, it's mortise and tenon joints throughout. It's fairly straightforward, fairly simple, but we'll go into some much greater detail in some of the important features as we move along. This is the top, MDF veneered with mahogany veneer, 10 by 30 inches. Now what we're going to have to do is to make our molding, and which will wrap around the top. Now the molding is a little thicker than the top, so when we make all of our cuts and our measurements, all will be referenced from the top of the table and the top of the molding. The first thing we will have to do is to cut a spline both in the molding and on the edges of the table. The idea is this spline will go in here. It doesn't add an awful lot of strength, but it will help immensely when you start to assemble this, and it'll hold it so that everything will be flush with the top. So the first thing to do is to cut the slot for the spline. While we still have the table saw set up, it's time to put this spline in the table top itself. It's important that all your reference is from the top of the table. Now the next cut we're going to make is to produce this little step here at the top of the molding, and that's going to be a single cut using the width of the table saw again. It's 1/8 inch wide by 1/8 inch deep. The final cut is to produce this 35-degree angle here. I try to make it so that it doesn't break through completely. That leaves the waist in there, adds a little bit of support. And any irregularities, that's going to be carved away anyway. Now to remove that waste strip, just a little knife cut is going to help to break through. The little waste that's left will be carved away. There we are. So now we have the shape of our molding. All right, now we're just going to miter the ends in preparation for the molding. To trim off the back of the table, I'm putting in this 1/8 inch wide trim just to finish it off. I leave the molding a little bit oversized so that after the final glue up, then this can be trimmed off nice and flush. This also gives a little bit of a finish to your carving. Now the next step is to glue it up using the splines. I have one coat of glue on the molding. Now it's a matter of applying some glue into the edge of the table. Don't overdo it, or else you'll have a lot of glue to remove from the veneered surface. Put in the spline. Of course, you've already gone through a dry fit. Since you're clamping on a tapered surface, I've made these little glue blocks, which it's a mirror image of the molding itself to help for the clamping. So they go underneath, and then they will distribute the clamping pressure evenly. Now that once you have lined up your miters, we're gluing this up in 2 stages. The front piece and then the 2 end pieces are done next. Everything is lined up, the glue blocks are in place, and now you can start and pull down. Now this is just for demonstration purposes. Of course you would have the full length of your molding here. But we glue it first, and then later on we'll come back with our side molding and glue those up as a single piece also. Now we're moving on to make the aprons. I've ripped the stock to size. Everything is prepared, and it's only have to make the joint. The joint is a lap joint. After that is cut, and we cut that first, then we can go back and finish cutting the rest of the stock away, and that's where the leg will fit in. I'm using a 1/2 inch diameter bit and a pusher stick or pusher plate to hold my work. Now, I can't emphasize too much the importance of laying out before you make your cuts. What we're going to do are these 2 cuts here. That'll be for the leg. So be sure to lay those out, because I'm going to cut them with a bandsaw a little undersized, and then finish it on the router. Now we're going to use the router to set up and take out this cutout here and get it right to size. I'm using this right angle fixture, home built. The plate here is simply a limit so that I only go so deep into my cuts. Starting on the legs, I've milled the stock to size, and I have laid out the location of mortises and the drilled dowel holes. I can't stress any more possible that the layout is essential. Lay out very carefully each leg, because all the legs, they're all different. There'll be a right hand or left hand. Some will have two mortises. Some will only have one. So lay them out before you do anything, and then you're sure of what you have. The legs, the way they are attached to the frame is like this. And all of the references, all of your measurements come from this inside edge. The rest is just for visual. Now there's going to be a 1/8 by 1/8 inch chamfer at the top, and it goes all the way around, but that should be done after you have done your assembly, because when this chamfer comes in, it stops at this surface right here. So if you're going to do them ahead of time, do them just up to that point, a little bit shy. After you've glued up, you can finish and trim that chamfer. The long curve of the leg comes out to be about a 15-16 foot radius, which is kind of awkward to do on your shop floor with a long piece of string. So we use the old spline system. I have a block here and here at the end, 1.5 inches high. I set my spline onto it, and then I can just bend it to the curve, my layout line, 1/4 inch below my reference line, and then just draw my line. So now I have this curve of the leg. Now the final curve that comes up to the end of the leg, it's about a 7.25 inch radius. So I've made a template and I lay it in here, remembering that this stops short 1/8 of an inch. We want a little 1/8 inch flat at the end of the leg. And then that's just a matter of drawing that in. Or you could pencil in one at a different curve. And now that entire leg is laid out. So now we need just to drill and do the mortises. Now what we're going to do is drill the 3/16 inch dowel holes, and these go all the way through. And then we'll go on to the mortise. All right, now what we're doing now is drilling the holes for the mortise, 3/8 diameter by 9/16 deep. Now at the bandsaw, we'll be cutting the waste away on this long curve on the front of the leg. Now the smoothing is done with a spoke shave. It'll go rather rapidly. Just get your flatness by feel. You'll have to work from both ends because of the grain, because this is a curve. For this final tight curve, you're going to have to use a drum sander to get in there. The spoke shave just won't reach it. All right, we're going to do the mortises for the stringer. You can use a dedicated mortiser. They're wonderful. The mortising attachments for a drill press work perfectly well. I have one myself. But on the other hand, since this is carving, it's kind of fun to do them by hand, and it's really very straightforward. The first step is to drill a 3/8, in this case, 2 3/8 inch holes. This gives me the bulk of my material that's removed. And the rest is just chopping out with very sharp chisels. Just start cutting out the waste in the center. And what we'll do is we will now use the tenon for the part that goes in here as our gauge. Start and take out the corners. In this case, I'm using a 1/4 inch chisel just to get the waste out. I can then use my 3/8 inch chisel as my reference. This is really wood carving in its simplest form. Checking the width now, it needs a little bit of touch up. Here's my 3/8. If you're concerned about going straight down, as you should, you have to, you could always get a small block and use it as a gauge. But generally, you can do it with freehand. That's just about it. Now I'll go for length. You don't need a true mortising chisel to do those. The mortising chisel, that is very good if you have to hollow out all of the material. But by drilling it out, you have plenty of room now. And the ordinary bench chisel, or whatever you happen to have, providing it's sharp. Let's see, where are we? Just a little bit of thickness here. When you're doing your fitting, if you look very closely at the surface, you'll see a burnished area, and that's pretty much where it's too tight. And you can just focus on that. And it's done. Now to do the stringers, again, layout is essential. I've laid out my 3/8 by 3/4 inch tenons. You only have to lay out one at one end, because when we do it on the router, we'll keep working our way on each end until we get them to the size we want. So it's off to the router. So now I'm going to cut the tenons on the end of the stringer. I usually set the cutter a little bit shy of my mark. Then I can make final adjustments to bring it up. I'll do both ends as I'm working. I'll make the shoulder cuts now. The depth will remain the same, but I will just flip them over on sides and then the undercut slightly, check my size, and then come back and do a finished cut. Now I'm going to drill the 3 holes for the mortises for the bars. This curve is done exactly the same way as the legs. Curve is a little bit different, but the whole process is exactly the same. After this, we'll bandsaw it, and then with a spoke shave, smooth the curves. Now we'll just smooth this off with the spoke shave. Now the next thing we're going to do is to make these bars. Now there are 3 bars. The center one is vertical. The 2 outer ones tip out at approximately a 1.5 degree angle. Now to compensate and to get all this squared away, the first thing to do is to make the center bar. There is a 3/8 by 3/8 tenon on the end into a 3/8 square mortise here. I would make those first and then set your length to suit. Then after you have assembled this, the dry fit, then you can come in, set in your side bars, and then you can start and adjust for this 1.5 degree angle. The way I would do it is I make the top square without any angle. Then I will go and insert them in here, checking this angle, and then mark where the angle is. Then I can come and with a chisel, I can pare these out to the correct angle. It seems to be the easiest way to do it rather than try to do it mechanically. Also, measuring it during the assembly compensates for any error in the length that may have grown into it. So we can go over to the router and start making this tenon. Now just a few adjustments on the height and depth of the cut, and we can make a trial cut so we can check our final size. Now using a good protractor, I'm going to set this to 1.5 degrees. I'm going to use a sharp knife, which will leave a nice fine line rather than a pencil. And then I will go over, but I will have to reverse this angle to go 1.5 degrees in the other direction. Pay attention to that. You may end up with 1.5 degrees going in the wrong direction. And then at the bottom where they meet, I will make another cut. Now it's a matter of chopping them out with your chisel. That little bit. Turn it over. Do the other side. Mahogany is pretty soft, so if, unless you choose some other wood, this can be done pretty much by hand. You will have a little bit of a shoulder there. This is pared away square so as to meet those two. Okay. Undercut. So now we have this angle here ready to fit onto the table during a dry fit. Now, having inserted the bar in the appropriate hole in the top, we line it up so that it would be centered in the position it's going to be. And then with a sharp knife, you can come in here and make a mark here with a knife and here in the back. What that does is that defines this new angle, and it also establishes the length that you're going to have. So then it's just back to the bench, lay this out, rough out the mortise on the tenon on the router, and then come back and trim, as we did before, back to those lines, and then everything should fit. Having made the top end of each bar, we can now cut these mortises and check it for fit. Just a little 3/8 inch chisel. Layout, again, is essential because your drill hole may not be perfectly centered the way you want it, but we hope that your layout lines are. Then I use a 1/4 inch chisel just to catch these corners. I'm chopping down perfectly straight because the mortises or the tenons on the side are straight, and these are straight, but that angle, there's enough flex that you don't have to put these mortises in, at least the outside ones, at 1.5 degrees. That would really be unnecessary. I'm just following your lines. Try to go down nice and straight. These little air cans that you use for cleaning computer boards or computer keyboards are really very handy in the shop, blowing out chips, all kinds of little useful jobs that you just can't get into. Now, with this fine length needs to be touched up. A little bit more. That felt better. Almost there. See where I'm a little bit of pressure there. Perfect. Now you'll notice that you can bend this quite a lot without any interference. So this will take care of the 1.5 degree angle. Well, we've run out of time now. We're going to be back next issue for the final assembly and the carving. I hope you've enjoyed it. This is Dave Reilly for Woodworking at Home.